네, 그럼 지금부터 마지막 세션인 UN SDG 16 플러스 세션 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네.
Okay, welcome to the session on UN SDG 16 plus. Can you please, those who are sitting in the back, please come to the front, okay? Those who are in the sitting without table, please come to the front. There are some empty one in the front. It doesn't look good, you know? So when you take a photo. Okay, those who are sitting in the back without table, please come. You can enjoy table. Okay, so welcome to, this is the last session of the day before we have a banquet. I still don't know about the menu. So let's have the intellectual food first before we have a physical food. So as you see the program, the table of content, this session we have three speakers. And good news is we don't have discussant. So another good news is you are all discussant. You are not simply listener, you know. Okay, you are the participant and discussant. So I will invite you to freely express your own opinion about three presentations. And I want to also guarantee in this room is a YouTube, right? YouTube. It's a YouTube, Facebook broadcasting, right? It's a YouTube. So make sure that, you know, this room, there is a freedom of expression, but you may not have a freedom after expression. So don't take a risk. So when you make an intervention, there's a YouTube. But tomorrow session, no YouTube, you know. So tomorrow, there is a full freedom of expression before, during, after the session. So before we present to you the three presentation, I'd like to present PowerPoint, because this is the first time in this Gwangju Democracy Forum, we are introducing SDG 16 and plus, not minus. So people might be wondering, why suddenly SDG? This is a democracy forum. Why? So what is the connection between democracy and SDG? That's why I want to explain briefly why we have a three presentation in this Gwangju Democracy Forum. So as you see, three keywords: peace, justice, inclusion, or democracy. The next slide. Can I control? Oh, yeah. Those are participants of Youth Democracy Forum. You have received this PowerPoint, so you can have a look. Okay, so these are famous 17 SDG, very colorful. And then, as we see, there are a lot of initiatives globally. So this is an initiative linking SDG to peace and democracy by Community of Democracies and also IDEA, which is an international organization, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Their slogan is, we cannot achieve sustainable development without peace and democracy. You know? Okay, so democracy is a precondition of sustainable development. At the same time, SDG and human rights. So this is the logo of the human rights, like the bird dove and then 5 fingers. You know? So they want to see how to mainstream human rights into 17 SDGs. And then this is the official logo, icon of UN, the peace, justice, and strong institution, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. So this is the official title of SDG 16. And then, I don't know who made it. It's not by UN, you know. So one private company, even they provide the icon for individual targets of SDG. There are 12 targets of SDG to communicate. Who cannot read, but who can see the picture, you know. So these are 12 the targets of SDG 16. You know? And as you know, these are 5P, the people for social development, prosperity for economic development, and planet for environment, and peace is a goal 16, and then goal 17, partnership. So these are 5 pillars of the 17. And then this is a full text of the 12 targets. 12 targets, there are many, but obviously we cannot cover all 12 targets. So we have selected some key the targets which are very, very important or are linked to democracy. You know, I will introduce later on. And then in these 12 targets, there are different approaches, more structural approaches. Basically, the UN, they put 3 pillars: peace, justice, inclusion. So, according to SDG framework, we are seeking for peaceful society, just society, inclusive society, together with a sustainable society. You know? Socially, economically, environmentally sustainable, at the same time, peaceful, just, inclusive, you know, as a whole. You know? So this is a vision of SDG, especially goal 16. So SDG 16 plus approach means SDG 16 need to be addressed not alone in isolation, but linked to other goals. You see, there's a goal 17, 1, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11. These are all related goal 16. So this is a so-called SDG 16 plus approach. But in reality, many governments, their approach is SDG 16 minus approach. That means they want to address SDG without SDG 16, you know. So that's a reality. But our vision, our goal is plus approach. So SDG 16 plus goal 10. Goal 10, economic inequality and democracy and human rights. So there is a campaign, the Act Now for SDG 16 plus, international campaign. You know? So I will send more information. If you think SDG 16 plus approach is important for you, so you can join this campaign. You know? So this is another one, actually putting SDG 16 plus into practice. There are many materials in the YouTube and also the Google. Okay, so finally, stand up for SDG 16 plus. So this was 4 years ago. The Pathfinders and the global network of the NGOs, international organizations, and government working on SDG 16 plus. So this is their diagram to explain about 3 pillars: just societies, inclusive and peaceful societies. Another way, the PhD approach in Gwangju. So instead of inclusion, we use term democracy. Instead of justice, human rights. That's why PhD stands for peace, human rights, and democracy. But this PhD means different things in Indonesia. So Indonesia PhD means, what's the meaning of PhD in Indonesia? Many Indonesian people say PhD means Pizza Hut delivery. Is it right? Is it right, Indonesia? Okay. But that pizza, this is a PhD. So you're not supposed to study for PhD, but practice PhD, you know, peace, human rights, and democracy. That's SDG 16, you know. So there is some component of peace, human rights, and democracy. Now, finally, there are 5 components of SDG 16. In the middle, there's a democratic accountability and participation, target 16, 6, 7, 8 plus. And also there's a violence, social peace, and rule of law, access to justice, especially target 16.3, and fundamental human rights and access to information, 16.10 and 16b, and anti-corruption. So these are the 5 concrete, the components of SDG 16. So in this session, we are going to address 3 topics. The first one, freedom of information and the expression is related to 16.1 and 16.10. And second, the first one by the Professor Park, and second one, civic participation in democracy and government accountability, related to 16.3, 6, 7. And then the civic participation to implement democratic election. Okay, so these are three, the presentation we want to present to you for discussion. But remember, this is a part of SDG 16 plus approach. So after listening to presentation, I think important for us to discuss not only details of this three presentation, but also how these are linked to the wider issues, SDG, democracy, human rights as a whole, and also transitional justice. So transitional justice is not the issues of the past. This is the issue of the present and the future. Unless we address transitional justice, there is no future for the democracy, as we experience many countries, right? So let's try to analyze this SDG 16 plus linking to the transitional justice and state violence and many others. Okay, so now I'm very happy to introduce with this background, first presenters, Professor Park Kyung-shin. OpenNet is the name of NGO, but he's from Korea University, teaching about the law, especially the human rights law. So you need, how long do you need? 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 15 minutes? 1 hour, okay, so let's negotiate. Okay, the 15 minutes. So try to finish your presentation. You're a professor, right? So professor means he can control time, So within 15 minutes, you present your paper. Page 71, your program book, there's a text. So he will explain based on the text, not reading, so that he can finish within 15 minutes. All right, you have a floor. Let's give a big hands to Professor.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I think he already spoke about SDG 16.10. So I'll go right in to what I think are the important legal landmarks for establishing or meeting the target 16.10. Three things. The first is access to information. Access to information as in Freedom of Information Act, the law by which the government discloses information to the people that the governments serve. Also, open government data. I call open government data Freedom of Information 2.0. So open government data means disclosing the information to the people before people request disclosure. So making that information available in advance. There are new threats to freedom of information and access to information. There are these laws that are branding information as a secret and exempt from freedom of information request and other access to information. So that's one big topic, access to information. The second big topic is persecution of a journalist. And persecution of a journalist is taking place, not just journalists, human rights defenders. One of the ways of defending human rights is sharing the information about human rights violations. So these days, journalists and human rights defenders are indistinguishable. So that persecution is taking place through criminalization of speech, and I'm going to talk about the legal strategies in pushing back against criminalization. The third is internet freedom. It's not just human rights defenders and journalists and other career activists who provide protection for fundamental freedoms. It is the availability of people who will respond to that information that will guarantee that human rights violations will be addressed and redressed. So I'll talk about the value of internet and also emerging threats to internet freedom. And in talking about these three topics, I'm gonna use Korea as a main example, and also what's happening in other parts of Asia, especially Southeast Asia. So on freedom of information, in international standard, Korea, in terms of number of freedom of information requests, is doing quite well. The problem is that there is an exemption. There is a very broad exemption from freedom of information request. That is, if the law is if the information is designated as confidential by other statute, regulation, then that information will be exempt from disclosure request, and this is just too broad. In many other countries that have had a head start on this system require the exemption to be made only by the legislature, only by the people's representative directly. In Korea, government agencies, they can decide whether information is confidential or not. And this is like having a cat watch fish. Now, in terms of open data, Korea is trying to catch up with, of course, international trend, like setting up a website where the government discloses Excel files and other structured data files so that they can be examined by people to detect corruption, to suggest better policy alternatives, etc. So we do have data.go.kr, KR standing for Korea Republic, which is supposed to match data.gov set up by the US government, and also data.go.uk, the website of the UK government, and many others. However, if you go into the website, you can see the numbers. Data.gov has 250,000 data sets, and Korea's website, data.go.kr, only has about 60,000 now. In terms of population, you may think that, okay, 60,000 is a good number. However, if you go into the website, the data files that Korean government makes available are very granular, very specific to specific administrative districts. So if there are like 500 administrative districts, let's say the list of cigarette sellers in District A, that's counted as one file. List of cigarette sellers in District B, that's counted as a second file. So, but if you go into the US government website, it's all national files. It's a data about the whole country. So it's really hard to make a distinction. Now, one of the threat to this access to information is the governments are creating more and more categories of information that are exempt from people's access. And one concept is national critical technologies. And these are categories created by the government to actually protect Korea's big businesses in defending workers' rights claims from the people who are injured at Samsung's semiconductor factories. And these new categories are paralyzing the efforts of the workers to bring justice to the injuries that they suffer. So that's one big topic, and I hope that when your home countries upgrade freedom of information, these lessons from Korea can be taken into account in responding to legislative changes concerning Freedom of Information Act. The second big topic is persecution of a journalist. I'm not going to talk about how important this is and how this has increased in this past few years. And the legal measures in the legal justifications for persecuting journalists, number one is defamation, of course. Number two is blasphemy, especially in the countries where there is a state religion. The journalists, human rights defenders, or any other dissidents who criticize the government policy are deemed as criticizing the religion, and they are punished for blasphemy. Third is anti-terrorism and national security laws, and you all know how that's being played out in Myanmar right now. Many of the democracy fighters and people supporting it are being branded as terrorists and being persecuted as such. The fourth is false news crime. This something I didn't have time to fill in the blank. False news crime has been around for a long time, and these days, post-Trump, it's so ironic how Trump was the main source of has been the main source of fake news, and yet he's the one who has again created this worldwide trend of punishing disinformation. And many authoritarian governments jumped on the bandwagon and made these laws to criminally punish false news. And in human rights circles, the verdict on the attempt to criminalize speech for being false is clear. You should not punish speech simply for being false. The context is much more important than the text. If you give the government the power to punish you for making a statement that the government believes to be false, it will be a slippery slope that can allow the government to punish many legitimate speech. Now, strategies to fight these criminalization trends. Number one, there has been a very slow trend of decriminalizing defamation. The UK decriminalized it back in 2008. We have decisions from the highest courts of Kenya and Zimbabwe that said criminal defamation is disproportionate and unconstitutional. And yet, we haven't seen the major countries follow suit. This is a big problem because a country like Germany still keeps criminal insult in their book, and there are more than 10,000 insult cases out of Germany, and it is being used as a justification for maintaining criminal defamation in many countries, including lèse majesté in Thailand and other criminal defamation laws protecting the reputation of high government officials. And the other big strategy that we should pursue is abolishing truth defamation. I mean, this shocks a lot of people, but in Korea, we have a defamation law where people can be criminally punished even for sharing truthful information about others if that information lowers the person's reputation. That's one of the reasons that has suppressed Me Too revelations in South Korea, because people making the revelations can only do so at the risk of being criminally punished. The movement to abolish that has been ongoing, but has not been successful. And also, when it comes to criminal punishment for false information, there has been a very strong line of precedent in highest courts of different countries, and also international human rights fora that have found false news crime or other criminalization of false disinformation are inconsistent with human rights. Finally, internet freedom. Now, I wear two hats. I'm a law professor, but I'm also director of OpenNet. We, as an organization, believe this hypothesis, it's still hypothetical, that the internet has enormous liberating power and equalizing power on human civilization, and the internet has been the only medium that has given powerless individuals the same power of information and publicity as big governments and big businesses. And protecting internet freedom is not just one of the ways, but the only way, or at least an indispensable way of defending human rights. And that hypothesis has been proven by how when authoritarianism rises, you see internet shutdowns. In Myanmar, wherever there conflicts are, the internet has been suppressed. And the same things happen in Africa and in other parts of the world. The internet, the access to internet was the first thing that the authoritarian regimes have taken away when they start their campaign of terror. Now, there are many other restrictions on internet freedom that are short of shutdowns, and that restrictions can be put in the matrix of data availability, data identification, data acquisition, and data restrictions. One victory that OpenNet and others had was fighting against the Internet real name law, which took away people's right to post things on Internet anonymously. Now, Philippines tried to pass Internet real name law last year, so people could post things on social media only by disclosing their real identities. The idea is that they can be tracked down by the police, so we opposed that, and President Duterte vetoed that bill, luckily. But this year, now Vietnam is, ICT minister in Vietnam just last week announced that they'll introduce the social media identity verification law, and people posting anything on major websites on social media will have to register their real identities. Of course, the pretext is that there are too much harmful information on social media, and people need to be held responsible. But you can see how the authorities can abuse that access to the identity to track down the vulnerable people and the human rights defenders. So I'll stop here, and there's more to go, but I'll use the question and answer session.
Okay, so let's see what we can. You see, he's a really good professor, 15 minutes. He made a presentation. Basically, there are, as you know, the three topics: freedom of information, and the criminalization, defamation, and internet freedom. These are the three key issues. As we see in the program book, there's a case study of internet freedom: Indonesia, and Myanmar, and Vietnam, and South Korea. And mainly Southeast Asia. That's why I want to ask during the Q&A, open discussion time, those are from South Asia, whether it's more or less similar to your country? This Indonesia, Vietnam, and Myanmar, or are different? And also we have a participant from other continents: Algeria, Tunisia, Nigeria, US, also Colombia. So I want to ask you, how is the internet situation in your country, so that we can have a global comparison? Because this is Gwangju Democracy Forum is not only about Asia, it's a global, So I think it's important to have a global perspective on this question. Let me ask you one question, simple question. How many hours do you use the internet? Less than 1 hour. Between 1 hour, 2 hours. Okay, between 2 hours and 4 hours. But not here, ordinary time, ordinary time. More than 3 hours. You don't use internet at all? More than 3 hours. Okay, less than 3 hours. Wow, that means we are all addicted to internet. So second question, do you think, this is a very simple, important issue, do you think internet is good for democracy? Is essential for democracy, or more beneficial for dictatorship or authoritarianism? Which one? Okay. Okay. So let me ask you, wait. Okay. One for good for democracy? No. Maybe good for even digital authoritarianism or digital democracy. Okay, good for democracy. No. You don't influence. Okay, authoritarianism. Oh, you see, there's several. So maybe 5 years ago, almost 90% democracy. I think next year, if you ask question, maybe more authoritarianism. It is a very dangerous sign. They use better internet to control, surveillance. So this is a serious issue. Just take into account, So we are talking about digital democracy, but at the same time, digital authoritarianism. That's what we are going to discuss, in terms of internet freedom and so on. So now, second presentation, let's go to, now, as you can guess from her costume, she's from South Asia, Nepal. She's a researcher for ICJ. You know what is ICJ? International commission of jurists. So she is doing a lot of research about legal aspect of government accountability and corruption, many other issues. So she will give us the global, especially the South Asian perspective, go into the SDG 16 related issues, accountability and government transparency. Okay, please, let's give a big hands to Sharma and Mandela. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Anselmo. Let me also join previous speakers in thanking May 18 Memorial Foundation for this opportunity. I was here in 2005 when Nepal was still under a state of emergency. I will share some of my experiences being here and going back to Nepal. Before that, let me very briefly provide you an outline of my presentation. I will stick to 15 minutes as instructed. Civilians do participate in fulfilling these SDG 16s in different ways. We have been participating in elections. We do vote for the parties that we like or the candidates that we like and reject those whom we don't like. But lately, unfortunately, elections are also stolen. We have seen this in Myanmar. There are fears looming large in Thailand now. We have similar situation back in home in Nepal as well. We thought that elections should be, fair and free. It has to be inclusive to allow everyone to really participate and also be the candidates and representatives of different voices. But unfortunately, different alliances have been made to really diffuse or defy those principles that are laid down in different international instruments. Civil society organizations are another form through which we participate in promoting SDGs Goal 16, for example. There are a number of CVOs and non-governmental organizations not only disseminating information, but also documenting, investigating cases of human rights violations to hold those responsible to account. But unfortunately, lately, there have been a number of attempts to undermine the work of civil society organizations, attack civil society activists, and also the human rights defenders. And these sort of attacks are done in a number of ways. One of such ways is to, through the legal framework in the name of regulating the non-governmental organizations. There have been a number of legal frameworks put in place making the work of human rights defenders impossible virtually in some part of the world, and largely in South Asia. Just to give you some example, these problems are not only in those countries which are known to be autocratic regime or countries having problems of democracy. Even the largest democracies, countries that claim to be the largest democracy in the world, have been taking measures like this to really undermine the work of human rights organizations, NGOs, and civil society organizations. As we speak, more than 6,000 non-governmental organizations in India have lost their registration, for example. And these are the organizations who are not liked by the regime, who are active in documenting, investigating cases of human rights violations and advocating for the rights of minorities in India, for example. There are a number of legal frameworks, laws that have been put in place in recent days in undermining free flow of information. You may have heard countries enacting information technology-related legislations that are also used to really target human rights defenders and civil society activists, and also to prevent free flow of informations and freedom of informations. A number of human rights defenders in Bangladesh, for example, are targeted using this law and are in detention as we speak. Similarly, number of human rights defenders are also criminalized using anti-terrorist legislations. Those who have been providing even the legal assistance to those accused of involving in terrorist activities are also criminalized as the supporter of the terrorist. So despite all this, I must say that we also have to celebrate and cherish the resilience, the extent of resilience that the civil society organizations, human rights defenders have been demonstrating in all parts of the countries or the regions to protect and promote human rights and rule of law. As I was sharing with you the experiences that I had when I was in Gwangju 2005, that was the time when Nepal, where I come from, was under a state of emergency. A number of rights, constitutional rights, were suspended. We were in the height of the conflict. We had internal armed conflict starting in 1996 that ended only in 2006. During that period, we witnessed unimaginable level of violence in the society. More than 20,000 people were killed, many of them summarily. They were the victims of extrajudicial executions. We still do not know the whereabouts of more than 3,000 people who were arrested, detained during those times. Thousands of people were subjected to torture, women were sexually abused, and thousands of people were arbitrarily arrested and detained. The space for civil society organization was very limited in 2005 when the state of emergency was imposed and military was mobilized to counter the insurgency that was ongoing in the country. So at that time, I really felt that it was only Nepal that had to suffer this much or this way. Even during those times, reflecting back, I could really say that we were navigating our ways to really resist those ongoing human rights violations in the country. At that time, it was impossible even to imagine that you could actually challenge the regime, the military that was de facto taking the power in the country. But I must say that we were documenting more than 6,000 cases of human rights violations, exposing those cases not only inside the country, but also outside the country, paving the ground for the international monitoring mechanisms in the country that contributed significantly in terms of investigations and monitoring of ongoing violations in the country. There was a sort of sense that you couldn't really bring any cases or allegations against the military at that time. But we were the one, using the tool at hand. Habeas corpus writs were not suspended even during the state of emergency. So using that tool, we were able to bring dozens of cases of writs of habeas corpus in the Supreme Court. Although that writ was not, those writs were not resulting in bringing or surfacing those who were detained illegally or those who were disappeared, but the cumulative effect of that was that in 2006, we were able to have a significant judgment from the Supreme Court of Nepal on the basis of those writs of habeas corpus that we were filing, that the state has to establish a commission of inquiry on enforced disappearances to look into the cases of enforced disappearances in the country and to criminalize enforced disappearances. So that actually provided a very strong ground for civil society organizations to advocate for the accountability for those who were disappeared during the conflict, and that process continues to happen even today. Similarly, civil society organizations were building their cases, helping victims to really bring complaints, demanding criminal investigations in all those crimes that they experienced, especially many of those crimes which were not criminalized. For example, torture was not criminalized in Nepal, enforced disappearances was not criminalized in Nepal, but killings, murder was criminalized in Nepal. So many of those cases where people were extrajudicially executed, we were documenting those cases, building on our information. We helped victims to bring cases, complaints demanding criminal investigations, even to the people who were in high-ranking positions. Initially, population thought that it was impossible, but as we speak, there are 138 cases pending before different districts in Nepal that involves high-ranking officials, politicians, army, police officers who were alleged to have committed extrajudicial execution in Nepal. Why I'm saying this is that these sort of activism, this sort of work that we thought would not bring any result in practice is now providing very strong ground for us to really engage in transitional justice process, establishing accountability for those past crimes of human rights violations. In all those 138 cases, there was no investigation, but building on that, we have brought the case in the Supreme Court, where the court has ordered investigations and prosecutions in all those cases. So now there is a sort of possibility, very strong possibility for establishing accountability in all those cases of human rights violations. There have been a number of attempts to establish commission of inquiry to look into the past crimes of human rights violations. But I must also have to say that we also don't have very good experience with the commission of inquiries. There have been a number of commissions of inquiries in the past in Nepal to look into the cases of human rights violations. But the commissions of inquiries were actually established to diffuse the popular demand for accountability in the country. They did not really contribute significantly in establishing truth or uncovering truth and providing reparations and justice for the victims. So this time we are actually demanding, based on those experiences, demanding the commission of inquiry that is established through the law that governs the mandates and powers of this commission of inquiry and ensures the guarantee of its links to truth, justice, reparations, and non-reoccurrence. As we speak, we have been negotiating with the government to establish a comprehensive transitional justice process that allows to establish Truth and Reconciliation Commission to uncover the truth, special court to try those who are involved in serious human rights violations, provide reparations for the victims of human rights violations, and to recommend measures for the reforms of institutions. And it took us 17 years to really fight to get into this point, and our struggle continues. But using the available tool at hand, we have been trying to navigate our ways in a creative way so we could actually establish a meaningful transitional justice process in the country. We have resorted not only national laws, national jurisdictions, we have gone beyond national jurisdictions. As I said, there were orders from the Supreme Court of Nepal to open investigations in all those 138 cases that I mentioned. Despite that, there was no investigations. The court orders are defied openly. That's the time when we resorted to universal jurisdiction. We developed a case to bring an alleged perpetrator involved in torture in Nepal, for example, to be arrested in the UK under universal jurisdiction for the crimes that he committed in Nepal in 2004. We also work quite extensively with different actors and partners around the globe to impose sanctions on some of the alleged perpetrators. These sort of tools provide leverage in promoting human rights discussions, discourse, and expand the debate within the country. The Supreme Court, as I mentioned, there have been a number of attempts in the past to pass legislations to provide amnesty for those even involved in serious human rights violations in the name of reconciliations. There has been a promise to provide compensation for victims, but to forego any process of criminal accountability. That has been also challenged. So through the litigations that we have been able to bring by organizing victims themselves have resulted in very powerful and very landmark decision from the Supreme Court of Nepal stating that any transitional justice process in the country has to be consulted and in discussions with the victims and civil society organizations. There is no possibility of providing amnesty to those international crimes and also recognizing reparations as victims' rights. And that provides very strong grounds for us to negotiate the bill that we are discussing today. And I'm really very grateful to the May 18 Memorial Foundations. We could also get inspirations for the memorializations of the sufferings that victims go through. So it keeps reminding us for the non-repetition of this. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is more about South Asian context. In the report, Program Book 88-89, you will see some case Indonesia, India, Nepal, Bangladesh. And then particularly there was a case of FCRA, the foreign contribution. Contribution means money, foreign funding. That means you cannot send out money abroad or you cannot receive. This is becoming very, very serious. Second one is anti-terrorist. If you criticize government, immediately you are anti-terrorist. I'm a terrorist. And then check and balance, judiciary independence. These are the three key the issues she mentioned in different country cases. I want to ask quickly, opinion poll. Your country has this foreign currency restriction law? Please raise up your hand. Your country. That means foreign contribution means can you receive money from abroad and also sending money abroad freely? Is okay? Okay, opposite. Has the problem, restriction. Oh, which country? It's Uzbekistan, Algeria, and Thailand, India. The rest, are you sure you can send the money abroad? The rest? Receive, but cannot send. But not individually as an NGO, as an NGO, So this is becoming big issue, some country, there are a lot of control, instead of political control, financial control, Because as you know, many of us, we also get funding, from abroad, So this is one issue. And what about terrorist law? Do you have an anti-terrorist law in your country? Wow, almost all. Okay. So this is also very, common, So later, again, I will ask, those who are from outside, whether this is common, including the France, and also we have participants from Hungary, Please share, what is the situation so that we can have a global view, Okay, so this is the second presentation. As you know, this presentation was very much linked to the target 16.6 and 16.7, I want to make a reference once again, Let me read for you. Target 16.6 of the SC 16, that is develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. So now we are looking at South Asia in terms of this. And then 16.7, ensure responsive and inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. So one is an institution, like a hardware, and then 16.7 is a decision-making software, So now, three presentations. Third one is about election, the decision-making. So she'll present to us about situation of election. That means civic participation in elections. So mainly focusing on, again, Asia. Sorry about those who are from outside Asia, but I will ask you, you can compare, Asia and your own continent. Okay. 찬다니에, 와타와라, are you ready online?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Welcome. So she's exec director of ANFREL, Asian Network for Free Election. So welcome. You have about 15 minutes, please. 찬다니에.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Anselmo, and also the good afternoon, friends. I'm sorry I cannot be in person this time, and because of the Thai election, just finished Thai election on last Sunday. We are in some work. Still, our observers are in the field. Okay. I think this is the first time I'm joining Gwangju the team. Again, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Is also inviting me to talk about the important, very timely important topic about the civic participation to implement election justice. Actually, that I'm really excited to see the proceedings of from the event, even virtually. I wish I can be with you all in person, maybe in future event. And however, due to the some other like urgent matters, I cannot be there. I'm sure you are all maybe especially maybe Asia delegations, they well aware of the ANFREL and also its engagement for ensuring free, fair, and democratic elections. ANFREL is an Asian, please allow me to share a little bit about ANFREL and what are we going to do, what we are doing, and also what is our main activities. ANFREL is an Asian-based organization working for promoting democracy through free, fair, and democratic elections since its establishment in 1997. Our activities can be divided into three components. One is that the election observation. Second one is that the capacity building or the enhancing the capacity of the election stakeholders, which include the civil society, election management bodies, as well as that maybe media personals. If you go through our website, you can see very recently we concluded one of the fellowship program that targeted the journalists who are mostly working on the media. And the third component of our activity is that campaign and advocacy, which is highly needed for the countries that are having many democratic struggles. If you look at that many Asian countries, they are not move forward, actually that they are backward about the democracy. Even though we are working hard, we can see a lot of a backward about the democracy, elections, and also that I'm really happy that previous presenter, she talked about that inclusive election in Nepal. We observed the election in Nepal in last year also. We have seen in not only Nepal, other countries that inclusive, democratic, and free, fair election are most challenging for the most of the world, especially on the elections. Okay, that Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights ensure the democratic elections, which many of the Asian countries endorsed or ratified the treaty and agreed to ensure every citizen have a right and opportunity to take part and conduct political activities, including voting, candidate, forming political parties without unreasonable restrictions. Of course, maybe we can go through some of the examples from our regions, and you can see that how these things be challenged in many ways. And also that periodic and genuine election also that are internationally recognized, and it is according to the international law and also the democratic principles. The past, I have been working with actually ANFREL the full time, almost 10 years. And I have witnessed what is going on in Asia while observing, while engaging, while advocating for the democracy. And also that we, as an ANFREL organization, we observed more than the 70 elections since 1997. Most recent one was the Thai election. It just finished. Our observers still in the field, and we are going to release our findings tomorrow. And hopefully, maybe I can share with the Gwangju Forum or the Anselmo and other facilitators who can share with your the participants. Actually, across the globe, in particular in Asia, democratic elections, democracy has become increasingly difficult. is not easy. Increasing the authoritarian leaders, maybe some of them are actually electing through the elections. That election is not democratic elections. Military intervention to democracy, communist country influence to the democratic attack. It has been like a many is in the country. We can give many more examples in our region. And at the same time, hate speech, money politics, disinformation, delaying election, regression to the election stakeholders are most common cases in many Asian countries. They have targeted, especially the election stakeholders. They have targeted digitally, physically elected stakeholders, including the citizen observers, including their rights to free movement, detention, and also the physical violence. In Asia, democratic government elections have gotten worse with the continued regression due to the emergence of the authoritarian regimes and the military interventions. Of course, you may already know what I mean, that which countries I am referring. However, I'm happy to share some of the examples, some of the stories to you. This year, especially in Asia, I think it's a very important year for many countries in Asia. They are scheduled to have 6 major elections, starting from the just concluded Thai general elections, May 4. The second election will be Timor-Leste, and then the third one will be Cambodia National Assembly elections on July 23rd, and the Maldives presidential election September 9, and the Pakistan parliamentary elections, Bangladesh election in January next year. Of course, Sri Lanka had a long and politically postponed local elections. In Cambodia, as the elections draw near, it is in July 23rd, July 21st. Actually, the attack on major opposition parties, independent media, civil society has a major repression from the authoritarian government, which has been in power for almost 3 decades. Just a while ago, ANFREL released a statement about that the Candlelight Party is the main opposition party at present, visible in and rejected by National Election Commission or the NEC for their candidate registration. We just released the statement against that. And also I have seen that some of the civil society organizations also come out and voice out about that the repressive situations. And also that media attack, also the free media revocation of the license for this voice of democracy earlier this year, February 13, accusing the news outlet of attacking him and his son because of the Hun Sen and his son. And mean that VOD has to be closed down. It is not it's a new thing. It happened in the previous election, just before the 2018 elections. They cracked down the Cambodian daily. And also that with all this, that I want to give credit to the civil society in Cambodia. They are very strong. They are united. That is one of the things I want to mention. They are working together, even with all the challenges to advance in the democracy. ANFREL and other like-minded groups are closely working to deploy citizen observers for upcoming elections. And also the continuing with voter education, community level and advocacy, continuing advocacy internally as well as internationally. And regional groups, their life is always threatened, and also that they have to use that because of the digital security threat is very high in Cambodia. If you have been in Cambodia, they know that you are most of the time, if you go for the meeting, that maybe that organizers say, okay, please keep your mobile phone outside. That means that they are thinking like they have experience because of the China influence. Their communication were hacked by the governments. And these are the things happening. And of course, that this is the Cambodia situation. How about Myanmar? I heard from the first speaker, he talked about the digital security and also how attack to the digital. But of course, that Burma situation is the lot. We need a lot of attention to Burma and civic engagement internationally, and as well as the national, maybe like regional, UN level, many levels. Our engagement is much needed for the Myanmar, as we have seen the zero democracy, and the people of Myanmar do not have any hope for democratic government yet. And recently, military junta is actually trying to have elections. It is not a democratic election. They wanted to get like a credibility. That's why they are trying to have elections, even though people are many Myanmar actors, activists are outside the country or inside this place. They have to hide. Some of them are behind the bar. Some of them are already sacrificed their lives and continuing. In this, I believe that international community, we need our solidarity, our support for the Myanmar. Sometimes that Myanmar, that they are going for the international community and telling like they are going to have a free, fair election. It happened in that even the ASEAN level also. ASEAN level in 2021, after the election, they go to the ASEAN meeting. They said like a last election, 2020 election is fraud and it's not free, fair. ANFREL was witness to the 2020 election. We took decision to release our report and stating that last election, means the 2020 election was free, people came to vote, even the pandemic, over 70% of the voter turnout. Of course, the election was held under the 2000 constitution, which was drafted by the military junta. And the constitution is already identified the undemocratic constitution, which has allocated 25 seats for the military. You are given to chance to vote for the 75 people, 75% of the parliament, even though people came to vote. Now you are saying that the last election was free, not free, it's a fraud. That's why military intervention, we did it. And they came to power. The February 1st of the 2021. And just before that, the establishment of the democratically elected government, they took the power, military took the power. And also that they cracked down the civil society engagement. People came to street, they cracked down media and even the internet freedom, everything cracked down. And they are trying to have an election and they're trying to change the many like a way of the PR system. I mean the way that they think that it should be like a benefit to them, they are trying it. And also they are elected the military junta, appointed UEC, now running the elections. Some of the countries actually welcoming those military junta appointed the election commissions. However, we still believe that the election commission was the real election commission or the genuine election commission was the who handled the election in 2020, including the election commission chair, sent it to jail. I heard that he was released, but some of them are still in the jail. And we don't have any information that how many are inside that. I know one person, the citizen observer who arrested, and some of the information we don't have. And also that some of the airstrikes going on that to kill the people, and also the extended of the emergency law as they wish. And that's why I strongly believe international community attention, support for those countries, they are having trouble. And also that we need to mention about the Bangladesh also. Bangladesh, they are going to have elections in January. People are demanding for the interim government. If there's no interim government, the next election will be also, we know the results. There's no equal access, equal space for all the election stakeholders to play. And those who have power undermine all the power, and they come to the, again, they can be the winner of the those countries in the Cambodia or the Bangladesh. Of course, that I maybe like actually I want to talk about Thailand, but I thought maybe not to talk about Thailand because that our observers are still in the field, and still we cannot generalize the situation. Tomorrow, that maybe we have a good shape to share experience of the Thailand elections. Thailand election, one of the things I need to highlight, especially about the civic engagement. This election, especially compared to the last election was the first election after the military coup in 2014, and this is the second election. This second election, I think we have seen that some of the progress about the civil society engagement. That is one of the things. Civil society that we watch for 62 very much engaged in the participation in the election. Rest of the things I may not discuss until tomorrow. Okay, and also that, and I would like to stop with that, the positive mind. The normally election observer, the citizen observers never recognized as the human rights defenders. This was recognized in the last, the year, October, during the UN meeting, commemorating of the Declaration for International Observers, Declaration of Principles for the International Observers. They recognize in the election citizen observers or the human rights defenders. I think this is a good sign. Even we are struggling, civil activism are very challenging. We are fighting for that. Even international observers, citizen observers, other stakeholders, civic democratic actors. I think this is the positive thing. We can maybe continue with that positive thinking. We have a space still for the democratic, inclusive, free, fair elections and democratic government. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, 찬다니. Thank you very much for your participation. So, according to program book page 90, this election calendar. So this week we have the Thailand. The result was very positive so far. And then next week we have Timor-Leste. Anybody from Timor-Leste here? I saw the one participant, right? So good luck for you next week. And then we have Cambodia, July. I think we need to add one more, Uzbekistan, right? Uzbekistan is there will be an election, the July. And then we have Maldives, Pakistan this year. Anybody from Maldives, from Pakistan? Maldives, we are Pakistan. And then Bangladesh. Any participant from Bangladesh? Okay. And then Sri Lanka. We have several. Okay, good. So I think the good news is election observer is not only democracy advocate, but human rights defender, As you know, this is 25th anniversary, and also tomorrow we are going to have a Global Human Rights Defenders Solidarity Day. It's very important to remember it's our right, not only vote, but also observe, monitoring, make election process more transparent and accountable. Okay, thank you for your contribution. So as I present to you, so we have a three presentation to cover some of the key target. I want to make a link once again. So as you see, the target 16.3, there's a rule of law and access to justice. And the 16.6, the institution, transparent, accountable institutions. 16.7, the decision making. And the 16.10, the public access to information and the fundamental freedom. So these are the 5 components, so-called democratic governance, which are very important for sustainable future, sustainable peace, sustainable society, and so on and so on, So let's have a now open discussion. So with 3 presentations, first, you have any question direct to the 3 presentations? 찬다니, you are with us, right? Okay, so she will also answer questions. So first, the floor is open for Q&A, and then I invite some of you to share your perspective and experience, especially your own country or continent, these 3 components, election, democratic accountability, and also the freedom of expression. So now, floor is open. Okay, let me count how many so that I can divide the time. 1, 2, 3, this law, so nobody, Aju, there's nobody from Aju. Okay, let's begin from the back, okay? Please stand up, and they will give you a microphone. Identify yourself, please, your name, organization, and also country if possible.
Hello. Hello everyone, my name is Kao. I'm from KDI School, Sejong City, and I came from Myanmar. And the last presentations about election is really interesting for me. And also I really thanks to that Ms. 찬다니에 for speaking out about Myanmar case. And here I would like to say that like elections are sometimes we use the election to legitimate the authoritarian government. It's not like all the elections, all the country which has the elections are democratic country. It's not like that. So we had in Myanmar, we had elections in 2020, and then military coup happened because they said that election had a fraud and it's not free and fair election. But everyone believes that it's a free and fair elections. So, and if military is going to do election again, because they are still saying that they are going to do elections, and we are not going to vote that election because that's gonna be the election to legitimate the military. So we still want the justice for the previous 2020 elections, and we want the elected officials from the 2020 elections. So here my question is, this is the lesson learned for other countries as well. We had a free and fair elections, and the military coup happened. So it can happen in other countries as well. So how to prevent this kind of situations in other countries? Like for example, now Thailand, they had a like really opposition party won landslide in previous elections. So how to keep the free and fair elections to form the government without interference from the military and other disturbance? Yeah, thank you.
Very important points. Of course, election is very important, the essential component of democracy, but election can be also misused for political purposes. So election, but in fact a selection. So free, fair election, but after election, less freedom and less fairness. This is a real challenge. So please, especially 찬다니에, maybe you can answer that question. Okay, number 2, please stand up. Okay, here in the middle, Chiquita from Indonesia.
Okay. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Anselmo, for the opportunity, and also I would like to thanks for all the speakers today because it such as a very good enlightenment for us, like as the students, because we totally aware about what currently happen all around the world. So I would address the question to Professor Kyun Sik Park. I think I got a little bit interested regarding that, like the civil strict restriction, because nowadays the freedom of expression and freedom of information is become a huge concern for the human rights defender in Indonesia as well, because there are both two of like our actually my colleagues, my friends, my beloved friends, like has been criminalized using the law of defamation, and I think it's also part of like the main concern around the world. So I think I just like questioning about, would you like consider or have like some of the insight what we like the international can do like to strategically advocate like this kind of issue, because as you already mentioned a lot of examples around the world as well as Indonesian, I think it's a little bit is it legit and true what you have been mentioned here. So I'm just wondering, do you have any exact recommendation about that kind of issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this question is all the presenters, you will have a chance to make a concluding remarks. So make sure that you give us some recommendation for action. So how can you address this problem together? So this will be the part of your concluding. But since there was a question, you can answer this question later on. Let's go to the third person.
Hello, my name is Yusra. I'm from Algeria and I'm a student at Gwangju National University. My question concerns civilians' awareness to politics. So let's say when civilians do gain political knowledge and become aware of how important their participation is in politics to reaching true democracy within like their country, At which point do you think they should start seeking universal jurisdiction, like system or justice, instead of taking matters into their own hands?
Did you get the? So what's the last part? Once, can you repeat once?
Yes. At which point do you think civilians should seek international jurisdiction or justice from the international courts instead of taking matters into their own hands?
Okay. So if I understand correctly, we have a domestic justice, international. When domestic justice fail, how we can use international, the system, right, for justice. Okay. So these are more general questions because today accountability is not within the country, but it's international. There is a UN, outside the UN, here and there. So how effective, how we can use all this. With this one, I think I want to ask, it's all from Asia, but we have a friend from outside Asia. So may I invite some outside Asia to make a comment or question, because we want to make sure that there's some comparison to what is in Asia and the other continent. Okay, I see one from Laura from Colombia. Would you like to share the Colombian, Latin America? How is the general situation in Latin America on this question? Internet freedom, anti-terrorist law, election. How is your general after listening to, three presentations mainly about Asia?
Yeah, sure. I would like to express that for sure. Regarding internet freedom, the example in Colombia, we're pretty much internet free. Like, we have the opportunity to research everything that we want. We are able to share any opinions that we want. There's no restrictions at all from the government or even international. We're able very much to get data from all over the world, except, and this is very curious, because even though the United States is part of America, because we all are a big continent, right? It is separated. They are North America, we are South America and Colombia. Even though we're the same continent, there are a lot of restrictions to get access to information within the United States, which is really curious because what I believe is, as a continent, we're supposed to share like common opinions and share data in order to grow as a community. But I understand like they would see South America and Latin America as something really well separated. So whenever I'm trying to do some research, especially government pages in the United States, is 100% restricted, so I don't get any access from that. And I have to use a VPN in order to get, just the whole information. So that is very curious about how we don't really have like any access in the United States. Regarding politics, we were pretty much a democratic country. We have justice, we have democracy at itself, like we can vote, we have different political parties, we have freedom of expression as well, even though not all the political parties are right, for sure. And there's the one that everyone follows because they have control of the media as well. So whenever we're watching TV, out of nowhere, there's this propaganda about the main one who wants you to vote for them, and we don't really have like the whole picture of it, but because everyone is following that same party, then you have that pressure to be, involved as well, even though you don't really know the whole concept behind it, and most of the time they don't really promise whatever they say in there. So it's really interesting, the whole thing, but in a general perspective, yeah, it's very much, equality and democracy as itself, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. As we learned from previous session, the Professor Chung said, transitional justice, we have a South Africa model, right? Truth and, and also whole Latin America, they have gone through transitional justice, The question is how this transitional justice can contribute to a more sustainable democracy, In that sense, I have learned so much from Latin American experience and also Africa. So we have a friend next to you. We have a friend from Africa. Could you please share briefly about general situation in Africa on this democratic accountability, election, and internet freedom? Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Annie Favor Chioma. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a master's student at Aju University. So regarding the media and freedom of speech, so Nigeria is relatively free, but then there are cases where the government is like placing certain censorship laws, and they are trying to manipulate and control the media by employing certain media influencers. Because there is a case that happened in 2020 where it was the NSAS movement. The NSAS movement was a mass civilian movement where the youth, they rose up to protest against police brutality. So the movement lasted for 12 days, and on the 12th day, the government actually sent the military to open fire on civilians. So a few months after that particular movement, the government banned Twitter in Nigeria. So the ban was for 7 months, because after the movement, so the citizens, they knew they could not like go out to like protest, so they turned to the media. And on Twitter, I think the tweets got to about 48 million, and I think it triggered the fear of the government, so they decided to ban Twitter. So when they banned Twitter, because Nigeria belongs to an economic bloc known as ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States. So most civil society agents in Nigeria, they reported to that particular organization, and the organization decided to take the matter into hand. And because of that, Nigeria actually, they removed the ban, and so right now there is Twitter in Nigeria. So regarding election, election in Nigeria is never free and fair. Instead, election in Nigeria is always violent, lots of bloodshed, vote buying, voter intimidation, outright fraud. So that's what is going on in Nigeria. So in February 25th this year, there was a presidential election conducted. The result was supposed to be uploaded on the National Collation Board the next day, but it wasn't.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Very much. So let's go one more person. Anybody from Europe or France or Hungary? You want to share briefly? Hungary? Maybe our friends?
My name is Myrtle, and I'm from Hungary. And to be honest, even though we belong to the Eastern Europe, so we are not as developed as the Western part, and Hungary is known to be the least democratic country in Europe, we do not have any problems with internet and sharing information. So all the elections are according to the rules. We post it on the internet, and there is no control over the internet. However, if some people post on it, then there can be consequences. So for example, if teachers, now there are teacher protests. So if teachers protest something against the government, that there can be consequences of that. But in particular, when it cannot be punished by law if anyone posts anything bad.
Okay, so thank you very much. So let's go back to now the presenters, 3 presenters. There are some comments and questions, so you can answer, and also you can make suggestions of what we can do together. But for Mandira Sharma, I want to ask one sensitive question. So you talk about democratic accountability. But as I said outset, many governments, they are very reluctant to use a human rights framework, But for them, SDG is okay, SDG, they don't see it's a political, so they prefer so-called SDG washing, SDG washing. But SDG 16, that's why, instead of they are using SDG 16, except SDG 16, the rest are okay, So my question to you is, how can effectively engage SDG 16 for democratic accountability or human rights promotion? Do you have any idea? So that means many of us, we are engaging human rights, engaging SDG, engaging democratic framework. But eventually our goal is more sustainable democracy, peaceful society, common goal, but different approaches. So in South Asian context or Asian context, how can we be more effective, collaboration among different approaches or synergy among different approaches? So this is a question. So let's go to the Chandani first. Chandani, are you with us online?
Yeah, answer.
Okay,
yes,
yes, please. Can you show Chandani face?
I think that Yeah, can you see?
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think among the
Oh,
many questions came out, I'm also learning from that, some of the experience from the different
sorry, Chandani, please wait. This is some
Nigeria and other
connection
countries.
problem.
And of course, the discussion about the previous elections. The question I also.
Okay. Can you speak later? Let's fix the problem first. Dr.
Okay. No, actually, that maybe I will start again, Anselmo, because when I hearing about that, some of the movements, some of the expressions, some of the countries, actually, I am also learning from your guys. I wish I was there. Anyway, that first question about the military intervention, how undermine the free fair elections. My maybe friends from Myanmar, she asked that because from her experience. I also thinking how to avoid that undermine the free, fair, democratic election or the will of the people through that military intervention. It is that mostly that Myanmar people experience for so long, and they get the first like a democratic election in 2015. After 5 years, they have to return back again to the after 6 years return back to the again to the military intervention or military regime. It is very hard to find the answer. Actually, it is like I was thinking how maybe you have to have a strong laws, because the constitution is very, very undemocratic. The 2008 the constitution, and that's why we always tell about that after the observing the elections that elections held within the undemocratic environment, undemocratic situations, and also that power always with the military, and 25% the military. And my experience, even after 15 elections, that the NLD got or the one party got the landslide, or the people got the landslide victory, even though 25%, that you cannot change the constitution. You need to change the constitution 75 plus 1 means that it never happened, because even the 25% of the military participation is not the regular participation. Every month, like a month, they change the name. They send the name to the election commission, they change. They are afraid of that even the military may be transit to change the mind to join in the democratic government. That's why that first thing is, I believe that you need to have a democratic laws. If you don't have a democratic laws, democratic principles, that country is very hard. Of course, that the good thing is Myanmar. I was there for 2 years. I worked there 2 years, 2014 to until 2016. I witnessed that civil society is very strong civil society. That is the good thing. Another thing is that international support is that I think it's much needed and not happen. When you go to the Cambodia, and because that Cambodia election in last 2018, it is like because of the there's no space for the opposition voice, opposition or the parties, civil society, and they had the elections, but ultimately 125 seats won by the one party. It's not democratic. That means like it is very hard to find the answer. Maybe this is the best answer, but I think we need to collectively find the answer through the understanding the real reality of the region, is Asia region. Yeah, that's my answer. I'm very hard to find this is the best answer or something. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Chandani. Chandani, can I show your email address later on so that participant can contact you directly? Okay.
Yeah, I will send you tomorrow that our Thailand mission interim report.
Okay, Thai election observation, the mission report.
We
do your email address.
You.
Yeah, okay.
I will send it to you.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Now, Professor Park.
I think it's interesting that from the audience we got input from Indonesia and Nigeria. If you look at my submission, you'll see that there's a lot I wrote about Indonesia. And Ministerial Regulation 5, one of the things that it does is it requires all platforms to register with the government, and unregistered platforms are being blocked right now, including PayPal. We just submitted OpenNet. We submitted third-party intervention with the court, where the Indonesian website operators are contesting the blockage under MR5. Nigeria had a chance, Nigerian government had a chance to pass the same law, mandating platforms to register with the government, but it didn't. After, the government must have felt bad after Twitter was blocked for 7 months. So the bill for mandatory registration kind of fizzled out. Why is mandatory registration important? Because it takes away people's ability to anonymously set up websites and share information. One of the important contributions to democracy, one of the internet's biggest contribution to democracy is that it made sharing of information so cheap and safe. He knows, the former democracy fighters in South Korea know how much he cost, both financially and in terms of safety, how difficult it was to pass out even a leaflet brochure about a demonstration. Korea is known for massive demonstrations attended by tens of thousands of people, but back then it was made possible by making these leaflets and hiding them from the police officers, and then if you get caught, you get beaten up, tortured. You are demanded the names and contact of the leaders of the movement, etc. Now you don't need to go through all of that. Back then, even to make if you wanted to get 1 million people out to the demonstration, you had to make 1 million phone calls, which costed money. Now you can just put up a video, just one video on YouTube, and you can have billions and billions of people watch that video at no cost to you. It basically scaled up the movement in terms of how much reach we can have. Now, that freedom to reach other people, to gather the strength of numbers, will be taken away if all those platforms are required to be registered. Now, you might be surprised, Korea also has this law. And because of that, there's Korean platform companies, it's like a leash on their neck. Because if that registration is canceled, their business will be outlawed. And the government has the final say whether the platforms are keeping in with the rules of the game. It is through this mandatory registration. So, like Naver, Kakao, these big companies, they are all given this registration number, which they have to maintain effective if they want to stay in business. So whenever the government says, "Hey, I think your algorithm is favoring the opposition party. Come in. We got to talk about this." Then they have to come in. Unless if they don't come in, then they'll say, "Oh, you are not meeting the registration requirement," right? So we don't want. Still we are, I think, battling that pressure, but this overtly innocuous I mean, apparently innocuous rule, like restoration of platforms, will have a poisonous effect on freedom of speech online. But I also understand people who raised their hands when they said internet is bad for democracy. I mean, take the example of Colombia. I mean, doesn't have really serious internet regulations like Indonesia or Myanmar or Vietnam do. These are the countries that I talked about in my submission. But the problem is the government is using the internet freedom to its own advantage. It's using all this government propaganda. It's flagging many dissident postings as a fake news, and inciting violence against people who are criticizing government policies and the military. So I didn't talk about response to that, but there has to be more accountability. There has to be more alliance between the big techs and the civil society in terms of how to moderate the government propaganda. That's on the agenda, and that's actually something new on the agenda that digital rights organizations are talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now let's go to the Sharma about the last question.
Okay, there was this question: at what point we consider universal jurisdiction? That's actually up to us meaning that this legal concept exists, possibility exists, but saying this, I'm not really saying that it is very accessible mechanism. It's not a sort of alternative to the justice process in the country where many victims live and reside. But these are some of the tools that have been developed in recent years that can be of use to the benefit of victims, not only individual victims, but also to pave some grounds for a wider accountability debate inside the country. And in that context, I was mentioning this case of Nepal. We consider this, when there is no possibility of justice in the country, inside the country, when there is no political will, no independent mechanisms exist. I think these are the conditions when victims have tried to use universal jurisdiction. Again, it's not accessible mechanism that I would say, but that exists. There could be different avenues, but when I said universal jurisdiction, it's a sort of legal tool that provides jurisdiction to the countries for some categories of violations, for some crimes. Because of the nature of that crimes, they are considered so severe that any countries could actually prosecute the perpetrator in their jurisdiction, even though crime was committed in some other jurisdiction by the national of some other countries, and the victim is also not the citizen of your country. So most of the countries that have ratified UN Convention Against Torture have enacted legislation to provide universal jurisdiction for those crimes of torture, for example, because it is a requirement under the Convention Against Torture that the country provides that universal jurisdiction for the crimes of torture. No countries are expected to provide safe haven for those LAs, those people involved in torture, for example. Similarly, countries that have ratified the Statute of International Criminal Court are also required to have similar jurisdiction for the crimes listed in the Statute of International Criminal Court that are like crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. So some of the countries have enacted national legislations providing jurisdiction for these categories of crimes. It is again very legalistic, very sophisticated tool. Nevertheless, it exists. And many countries, for example, there are individuals and organizations in Myanmar trying to use this tool to establish accountability for the crimes that victims of Rohingya, for example, faced in Myanmar. Similar attempts, similarly, the organizations and individuals, victims of serious human rights violations in Sri Lanka are also exploring this possibility in some other jurisdiction. So it's actually a new legal tool, but that can be used in providing some remedies for victims, but more than that, to really shatter the veil of impunity in different jurisdictions. I realized that when we were bringing this case, when the person, the alleged perpetrator, was arrested in the UK under universal jurisdiction, many other high-ranking officials from Nepal suspended their international travel. I think first time in their mind this exists, this possibility exists, and that fear actually provides significant leverage for us to have transitional justice debate in a meaningful way in the country. Otherwise, it was not seen as a possibility. The impunity is so entrenched in the country that they would never think that this possibility exists. So I think for that matter, these sort of tools are important, and this is the decision that civil society organizations or victims in the country has to make, considering your own situation. But in response to your question, Al-Salma, yes, I do see that the very term of human rights has become very sensitive. Those human rights defenders are also seen as troublemakers, spoilers, peace spoilers, agent of international organizations or foreign agents. The term human rights is actually hard fought as well. We did gain this because of the sacrifices that many people have made in the past. Many regimes now find it's difficult to really engage with this term, but we should not that readily give up using this terminology, because we really embrace certain standards, principles, and values when we say human rights. But of course, having said that, we should not also rule out the possibilities of using other avenues that would strategically provide us more leverage in gaining the same kind of output that we really want to achieve. So I'm also in dilemma whether to use these terms in the context where there is this very allergy in this system to really use this terminology, but I think as a human rights defender, I would continue to fight to retain that very concept that we really fought for so long.
Thank you very much. I hope you understand why we put this SC16 in the Democracy Forum, to expand our agenda so that we are not only in narrow sense democracy advocate, in narrow sense of human rights defender, because those who are engaged in SCG, they are also human rights defender, So I think that's very important to work together and using different approaches and strategies for our common goal, So before we end, there is one urgent request from Debbie. Because as you know, this is, I think, it's the only country where the internet cut. All we enjoy internet, but this country, for security reasons, for whatever. So I want to give before we end, the final, the intervention, the Debbie. Okay, please a micro, please. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Make a short, please. We have a banquet waiting for us.
Okay, let's talk about money. In the 10 years of transition in Burma, Myanmar, from 2011 to 2021, the military budget grew 3 times. the military budget in 2021 was 3 times the size of the military budget in 2011 when the transition started. Last month, the head of the illegal junta increased military spending for the current financial year, 2023 to 2024. He increased the budget by 51%. What does that tell you? Democracy is doing well? No. So when we say, how do we protect elections, democratic elections, when your government is increasing security spending, whether it's on securitizing the internet, whether it's on military, police, immigration, any kind of security, your democracy is getting screwed. How many of you are 35 years old and lower? How many of you are 35 and younger? Okay, how your government treats you tells you something about your democracy. In repressive governments, people aged 35 and younger are the biggest threat to national security because of how you use information and organize yourselves. It's not just about whether you can vote, but whether you can run for elections yourselves. This morning, we talk about transitional justice. Transitional justice means institutional reform, where you put the institutions that traditionally violated rights, you reform them so they cannot commit human rights violations again. It also means vetting. All those shit people who violated human rights should not be able to run for election and should not lead any public institutions. The moment you let them in, the empire strikes back. They will have another coup. So please remember that, and please remember, if you are from a democratic government, make sure your government has policies that oppose illegal regimes, that oppose coups, and oppose human rights violation, domestically and internationally. We are lucky that the local government of Gwangju and the people of Gwangju stand with all of us on democracy and human rights. But we need the government in Seoul to do the same, and we need the corporations of Korea to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You made a wrap-up for me, so we save time. Okay, this is my wrap-up. Thank you, Debbie. Now, before we go to banquets, so we have announcement, right? Important announcements. Yes, please. Okay, new mic. Okay, so while waiting for mics, can you give us finally big hands to the 3 presenters? Okay, thank you very much. Now mic working, right?
Okay.
You see? No.
그럼 now, 예, 지금 안내사항을 드리겠습니다. Please use the translator now, from now on. 예, 안내사항을 말씀드리려고 합니다. 지금 한국에서도 극우 보수 세력의 망동이 있어서 사회 문제가 되고 있는데요. 그들이 사회를 보는 관점을 떠나서 자극적인 소식을 유튜브로 담아서 돈벌이 수단으로 이를 악용을 하고 있습니다. 근데 현재 저희가 파악한 바로는 내일, 그러니까 5월 17일 내일 오후 2시부터 3시까지 이 건물 앞에서 극우 유튜버들의 집회 신고가 있는 것으로 파악이 되었습니다. 그래서 여러분이 계신 이 5.18 기념문화센터는 5.18 기념사업을 추진하는 재단이 있는 곳이기도 하지만 이 1층에 5.18 관련 피해자인 유족회, 부상자회 등 관련 3개 단체의 사무실이 있는 곳이기도 합니다. 5.18 관련 단체는 극우 유튜버들이 원하는 자극에 대한 대응을 하지 않기로 했습니다. 다소 언짢을 수 있는 일들이 있더라도 양해 부탁드리며 그들이 여러분들에게 접근하더라도 무대응, 무관심을 해주시기 바랍니다. 네, 감사합니다.
Everybody understand what is going to happen tomorrow? There's a right-wing YouTuber around tomorrow afternoon, so be careful, you know. Okay? They will be very aggressive, may try to interview you or provoke you, so don't react, you know. All right? That's what is happening tomorrow.
네, 지금부터 만찬이 있을 예정이니까요. 1층에 있는 리셉션 홀로 가서 만찬을 즐겨주시기 바라며, Please return your translator when you go out.